On today's episode, we are going to be working on how to actually cultivate self-trust. Now, and so in September's theme, we have been working on self-sabotage and why it happens and the ways that it kind of comes about and what we can really do. And self-trust is one of the most critical, most important things that we can do to avoid self-sabotage, but also this same skill set of self-trust, the same ability to trust one's own self. This is how we're going to hold big wealth. This is how we're going to be able to manage our money smartly. Some of the worst financial mistakes that I see really come from a place of I don't trust myself. And what ends up happening is when people don't trust themselves with the money, they just want to buy something like smart with the money before they buy something dumb with the money, and then it doesn't work. So in today's episode, we're just going to go over some ways, very practical ways to help build self-trust within yourself. So I'll start. The bulk of today's talk is really going to be around the mental level, but let's go over what it takes to build physical trust with ourselves and what it also takes to build emotional trust within ourselves. So within our physical self, if our body doesn't trust us to take good care of it, we're primed for self-sabotage, right? And so if we're going to say, oh, I want a high visibility, or I want to speak on big stages, or I want to do XYZ, and our body doesn't actually trust us to hold ourselves in a very different environment, really, and something that may feel dangerous, chances are it makes sense that she would get in the way, right? Like getting sick the day before your flight, or, injured, or whatever else. So on the most basic level, the things that you can do are really, really simple. And I've been talking about these things for a while. So if you've been following me, this isn't going to be brand new, but it's honestly what's so funny to me is the most obvious, the most important shit people do not want to do, but instead they'll be like, well, I'm not going to eat food 3 times a day, but I'll drink green juice and I'll take a $40 worth of supplements for breakfast. I was like, okay, it's just funny. It's just funny. So I'm going to just say it again. So you want to eat food when you're hungry. You want to drink water or drink something else when you're thirsty. You want to pee or poop when it's time for that. You want to wear warm socks. You want to get up from your computer. You want to set your eyes to the horizon. You want to see beautiful things every day. You want to laugh. You want to sing. Basically, I want you to imagine your body like your little human animal, almost like the way that you would treat your dog. If you were to keep your dog in a cage all day, not fed, not watered, not going to the bathroom, is that dog going to trust you? No. These are some really simple things to get a good night's sleep, to eat, drink, go to the bathroom. Now, the next stage of this would really be some more work on really like working on stretching your nervous system capacity and really working on just your capacity, but you have to be attuned for that. And so in my Limitless Wealth program, which is the program that I have for women who are scaling their service-based businesses, we do a lot of work on nervous system, like expansion and capacity. And that works a little bit more delicate. It's probably not super appropriate for a podcast, but the things that I'm talking about are going to move the needle in a really big way. And then from there, you can do the fancier things. But it's like, if you're not doing eating, drinking, looking at beautiful things, getting up, singing, dancing, ever, like if your body lives in a state where she feels like it's dangerous, doing the more advanced stuff, sometimes it's like, it's not wrong or bad, and it's still helpful. But the things that I'm talking about, these are the things that build self-trust. All right. Now, obviously, sometimes we have to wait to eat lunch. We have to wait to go to the bathroom. We have to finish a task before we get up from our desk. But I'm really talking about thinking about these things in the overarching big relationship that you have with your body. And so if you want your body to be on board with your big goals, she has to trust you. She has to trust that you're going to take care of her. This is it. All right. So a lot of it's really simple. All right, now on the emotional level, we have an emotional body just like we have a physical body. And the main thing that we have to do here is learn how to process our feelings, learn how to alchemize our feelings. And so all of the content that I've taught you guys about emotional range, I have in past episodes, I have on my YouTube channel. There's a lot there. And so you can go back to those. But basically, when our emotions come up, right, and our bodies feeling those emotions, if we have the ability to move those sensations up and out of the body, if we know how to alchemize them, which requires us to feel them and pay attention to that feeling, then what ends up happening is the fear of sensation becomes very manageable, right? And so if you're afraid of being judged, being seen, being criticized, being canceled, making too much money, having to deal with things like outgrowing some of your friendships, right? And these are sensation-based fears, right? They're not physical danger fears. And most of the time, they're not even actually dangerous, but they're going to feel dangerous if we don't have that ability to move feelings. So when we're asking ourselves to do things that are going to put us in really high sensation, what's going to be really important to trusting ourselves to hold that high sensation is to know that we can alchemize it, to know that if I get my heart broken today, that I'm going to be okay. Right? Like that's really the most important thing. And so learning how to do that emotional clearing work, expand your emotional range, emotional alchemy, that's really what it takes, for your heart to be able to trust your mind and your body on this. So when all of these things come together, then the emotional body's not going to be getting in the way, essentially. Or she'll get in a way that's very manageable. All right, so then let's talk about the mental level. So I'm going to spend the most time talking about this today because we live in a culture and society that really highly values the masculine, right? We value logic and reason over our emotions or, over our intuition. No, maybe not everybody, but a lot of, the vast, like the collective, right? We value making decisions with our mind, not, and oftentimes you'll hear people say, don't make decisions from your emotions. And not that you should make decisions from a really big emotional, like high or low point. But I feel like taking your emotional state into consideration while making your business decisions is actually like the move, right? Like, oh, let me do the things I love to do. Let me do the things that bring me joy, not just the things that logically will bring me more money that I actually kind of hate doing. It's funny, right? So let's talk about some of the ways where our mind breaks trust with itself. Right. All right. So a lot of second guessing. And what's so interesting is I will sometimes watch people parent their children. And I'll watch the kid be like, I want a hot dog or I want whatever. And the parents will be like, are you sure you want that? And they're not that anybody's doing this on purpose or with intention, but really what they're doing is they're installing the programming there to second guess yourself. And I noticed that it happens a lot with little girls. People are always asking, are you sure about that? Are you sure you want that? Are you sure you're going to wear that? Are you sure, And so most of us will have a habit of second guessing ourselves. So our brain or our intuition will be like, I want this. And some other part of us is going to be like, are you making the right decision? And so we waste a lot of time and energy second guessing. So that habit erodes self-trust. I'm also going to talk about there's a habit of trying, which is a little bit of an energetic, this is less mental and it's a little bit more energetic, but we're going to talk about it here. So trying is a very weak quality of energy, right? If I said to you, let's just say you invited me out for chicken wings, which I will always go out for chicken wings. If you ever wanted to invite me, I'm down. But if you said, oh, I'm going out for chicken wings on Friday with so-and-so, do you want to come? And I say, oh, I'll try to make it. Like you can hear in that answer that there's a good chance that I'm not coming, right? You can hear that there's a lack of clarity. There's a lack of decision. I'll try to come. Right. And so that energy of trying, it's like, who's Yoda, guys, it's like, there's no try, there's do or do not. Right. And I know that's not the exact quote, but, so that trying quality of energy is very weak. It's not trustworthy. If you make the decision like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm committing to it and you fail, that's one thing. But to come at it from a place of trying to do something is very, very weak. It's not trustworthy. Do you trust that I'm coming to the chicken wings? No, of course not. I just said I would try to come. I'm going to try to make that call. So there's a weakness, there's a failure, there's a non-committal, and so I'm not saying trying like making an effort towards something. I'm talking about the energy. There's a weakness in the quality of energy around trying. It's not trustworthy. All right. So let's talk about perfectionism. This is another mental habit that erodes people's trust. And it kind of goes with the first thing of second guessing, but people who are, and honestly, this plays into the emotional level. So people who would be self-diagnosed as like perfectionism will second guess. Really what I notice is the question is always like, how do I get it right? Like people will ask me that in like their businesses or their strategies. And I'm like, there's not like a right or a wrong way to do it. It's like the way that you want to do it will work. There's not like, there are some things that you can, and listen, this is within reasonable strategy, but sometimes people are like, should I do this? Should I do that? They want to try 1,000 different strategies looking for like the best strategy. And it's like the best strategy that you have is the one that you do. Right? So perfectionism, and what's interesting about perfectionism is that becomes like a mental problem of a lot of wasted mental energy. But really what it is it's that you can't deal with your feelings. Right? And usually perfectionism is rooted in that you're going to criticize yourself. And so to avoid that self-criticism, to avoid like you being mean to yourself, You'll try to be perfect so you could always be on the right side of your judgments. And, and sometimes this will play out with other people, right? Like if we had a super critical parent or, caretaker or something, sometimes we want to be perfect so other people can't criticize us. But I noticed in most of my adult clients, nobody else is criticizing them. It's them criticizing themselves. And so I think that perfectionism, as you expand that emotional range, a lot of times you can tolerate the sensation of not being perfect. But anyways, perfectionism is again something that erodes self-trust. And this is a little bit more insidious. It's not quite as obvious as some of the other things that I've mentioned. All right, so let's talk about the next thing that people do that erodes self-trust. And I'm going to just call it shit talking yourself. Being critical to yourself, noticing your faults, self-deprecating humor, bothering yourself, all those flavors of things. Like if you shit talk your body's like, why, like you're shit talking me. If you're shit talking the way that you feel about things, if you're shit talking your efforts, if you're shit talking your productivity, a lot of these ways that we're really, really critical with ourselves, it's just not really helpful and it's not conducive. It really conveys like a lack of self-acceptance. It really conveys that to one's own self. And so that's another thing that will really erode self-trust. The next thing I'll mention here is people pleasing, right? So when we betray our wants, our needs, our desires, our hopes, our dreams to get somebody else to say yes, when we do something that we don't want to do, and again, this plays into that emotional range. Like if we're afraid of somebody being disappointed with us and then we say yes to bringing, to doing something that we don't want to do or bringing something that we don't want to bring or whatever, there's an element of betrayal in that. There's an element of self-betrayal there. And so that's another thing that really erodes a sense of self-trust. And I will tell you that the more that you are one with yourself, the more powerful you are. People who trust themselves and do not self-betray, they show up in a whole different kind of way. All right, so let's talk about 3 mental things that you can do to really start to build, well, actually 4 things, sorry, to build that self-trust. So one is going to be like, make decisions, like, oh, I'm trying or whatever. A lot of times there's a weak masculine quality, non-committal energy. I am still pondering, I'm letting my mind spin. I didn't make a decision yet. That can really cultivate that lack of self-trust. So thinking about something, making a decision, and sticking to it is a great way to build self-trust. And that's not saying like never adjust your plans. It's not saying anything like that, but it's the ability to choose something and decide that everything else I'm not doing. I'm willing to do this. And it's for, oftentimes when I'm working with clients, we'll look at what that decision will require in terms of willingness. All right, well, I'm willing to work on this. I'm willing to record these videos. I'm willing to do X, Y, Z. I'm willing to risk this. I'm willing to work on my emotions so that way I could feel the high sensation of criticism or whatever else. So that ability, that mental skill of decision making really helps to build self-trust. It helps like when everybody knows what we're doing and we're all on the same page, cool. Keeping your commitments, another thing that builds self-trust. And a lot of times what I notice with people is the commitments that get broken are the commitments to self. So if you want to trust yourself and you want to really hold big wealth, if you say you're going to take a walk every day, do it. Keep that commitment to yourself. Hold that commitment to yourself. And I would even really go so far as the commitments that you make to yourself, I would really prioritize those higher than the commitments that you do to everything else. Now, again, that doesn't mean like if you're sick to take yourself to the gym. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about like if I say I'm going to the gym, I'm going to the gym. Now, if I'm sick or if I'm not well, I'm not gonna do that because then that would also be a self-betrayal. You have to meet yourself where you're at. But the person who regularly goes to the gym is different than the person who breaks that commitment regularly. You know what I mean? So, all right. So keeping your commitments. All right. So this is a way to build self-trust. And it shows yourself that sometimes you're willing to do it when, you're like, don't exactly want to. Right. But again, that's a weak mind is being like, man, I don't know. It's like, nah, do the thing. So keeping your commitments, holding your boundaries is going to be the other one. So making sure that the way that people talk to you is the way that you want to be talked to. If you have friends or family that we need to hold a boundary, that you're willing to hold that boundary. That's a really, really big thing when it comes to self-trust is knowing where your boundaries are. And if you've never had discussions with yourself around that, and especially like if you grew up in sort of fucked up situations, sometimes like we have to explore even where those boundaries are, right? Like I'll tell you, for me, I have a particular family member that I really have to hold boundaries with. I mean, I was like 38 years old before I really had a big sit down discussion with myself of like, this is super fucked up. I can't keep tolerating this, because it was just normal. It was just part of my normal, right? And so I didn't even realize that like a boundary needed to be in place there. And so anyways, I hope that's not happening for you, but I'm sure for some of you it is, right? Like I'm not the only one that grew up in maybe a weird or hard situation. So knowing where to hold your boundaries, knowing how you like to be treated, knowing when somebody's not doing that, and then really just holding the boundary, holding the expectation. And then if it's not necessarily a boundaries issue, but it's just like somebody's treating you in a way that you don't like to be treated, just removing that person from your life, or removing yourself out of that situation, or whatever else. So that's a way, and that's one of the things that builds or destroys self-trust in a pretty big way. The last thing I'm going to say here is really talking to yourself kind of encouragingly and kindly with yourself, like being nice to yourself. This is going to be a really important way to hold trust. And what I'm going to also say here is meeting yourself where you're at. Like if you're not feeling well today, making yourself go to the gym isn't really the thing that your body needs. So there's an attunement, right? Like, and if you're all stirred up about something, like being with your emotions maybe before you do other work might be the move. And so there's a quality of attunement here is where I'm talking about, is meeting you where you're at, and that brings us to like capacity. It's like so many people will betray themselves with super high or unrealistic expectations that a human couldn't possibly meet. And then she's bothering herself. And then this all becomes like a lack of self-trust. So it's just like a mental fuckery. So anyways, this is when you start looking at yourself like, am I in alignment with myself, or am I betraying myself? Is this action kind, compassionate? Am I being here for myself, or am I abusing myself? Like these are really, really simple questions, because sometimes we forget that we're treating ourselves, right? We're so fixated on something. I mean, I'll just confess this to you. Like, so when I was younger, I mean, I took phentermine, which is like a weird diet pill, for years. And now when I look back, I'm like, that was such a self-betrayal, right? Because it was like there was nothing wrong with me, but I was taking these drugs and starving myself to achieve this like aesthetic that was, I'm just like, it wasn't really worth it. And it took me a long time to repair that relationship that I had with my body, And still to this day, if I really try to go on a diet, it backfires. The trust is still a little severed, even though my body trusts me. And so I just want to point these things out. Like there's so much self-betrayal that's baked in. And sometimes our minds can be so fixated on the result that it's willing to push the body to the point of betrayal, or it's willing to push our emotional state to the point of betrayal, or it's willing to bend over backwards for other people to the point of betrayal. And so these are places that it's a tougher place for self-reflection, to be honest. And oftentimes when you see the ways that you mistreated yourself, like you can really like hurt your heart a little bit. You may have to even be with both sides of like being the betrayer and being the betrayed, which is, it can be a little heavy, but it's worth doing. It's worth doing, and it's worth getting right with yourself. So I don't know. I hope this gives you like a framework for understanding about some of these things, and really just being a person who loves themselves and takes good care of themselves and is trustworthy to themselves. Because this is really the magic sauce when it comes to building a big business, holding lots of money, being a success, but also really just not suffering. Like I talk about it in terms of business and like that kind of success, but this sort of skill enhances your money-making ability, but it also just enhances your happiness. You know what I mean? All right. Well, I love you very much, and I will talk to you next week. Bye, everybody.